Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of the Wedding Biz podcast, brought to you by Party Slate, our title sponsor, the first website designed specifically for event professionals and venues. On the Wedding Biz, I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons of the weddings and event industry. All of this is to provide you with education and inspiration and empowerment. And I want to offer to help as much as I can with various struggles and challenges that you all are running into. So if you can write me and tell me about them, I will do what I can to address them during the interviews. And otherwise, just write me at andy@theweddingbiz.com. Again, andy@theweddingbiz.com. And let me know what you're struggling with, what you're facing. And if you've got anyone you'd love for me to interview, let me know. I'll consider it. So, last week's episode, if you missed it, was King Dahl, former executive director of events for MGM Resorts, eventually in charge of 1,200 events a year. His own signature style was large and dramatic, and he had just a fantastic story about leaving it all to go travel with his wife, hang out for a couple of years, and then he came back in a different way that was just stronger than ever. It's such a great story. So that's last week. So I am so excited. Yes, I am. I've been waiting to interview this person for quite a while, and that is Marcy Blum, an internationally sought-after event planner and entertaining expert who, with 30 years experience, has been named one of the best in the world by Vogue, Martha Stewart Weddings, Harper's Bazaar, and New York Times Magazine. Marcy blends the tenets of theater, cuisine, decor, and atmosphere into every event that she creates. Some of her clients include LeBron James and Savannah James, George and Tomiko Soros, the Rockefeller family, Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, Billy Joel, and more and more and more. Marcy's been featured in countless publications, including People, the New York Times, and Vanity Fair. She's also appeared on television shows such as Oprah, Live with Regis and Kelly, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and The Rachel Ray Show. And together with event planner Sarah Haywood from London, Marcy has developed EPIC, EPIC, the Event Planners International Collaborative, to offer an intense and advanced wedding and event planning education program that is becoming very, very popular. And wow, did we cover it all. Marcy does not hold back. This is a wonderful conversation. So enjoy my interview of Marcy Blum. So Marcy, I can't count how many people of guests that I've had on the show who have said to me, you got to have Marcy, you got to have Marcy. I mean, I'm not joking. So
Bazaar.
Many people like you are. You're so popular. It's like, it's crazy. But I want to start by asking you, I got to know if this is true. Did you live on a commune when you were a teenager in 1970?
70, yes, I did.
Where was this?
Marshfield, Vermont.
Because I thought you were going to say California or something like that.
Marshfield, Vermont. We're New Yorkers.
The New Hampshire, Vermont people.
Right.
What were your parents doing that they...
crying.
What do you mean? Like, what's the story?
They said no, and I said, okay, bye. So that's what we did. Yeah.
Wow. You must have vivid memories of this.
I do.
Can you tell me anything about it?
There were about 20 of us, 25 of us, and we bought a farm. And I had just turned 16, and my boyfriend was 18. And most of us were somewhere between 16 and 20. And we just decided that we didn't want to live here anymore. So we bought a farm and tried to be self-sufficient, which was a joke.
What, like just grow your own food?
Well, we tried, yeah, but we didn't know
stuff.
what we were doing. But it was an interesting concept.
How long did it last?
About 2 years.
I mean, it's so quintessential, late 60s, early 70s,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I mean,
as am I.
Listen, I was around. I totally remember it. But was there anything, as you were growing up related to being in events? I mean, I know some of your history about studying in France with James Beard and John Clancy, baking. We're going to get to it in a minute, going to the CIA, Culinary Institute of America. But growing up...
My mother was a fabulous cook, and she was a remarkable hostess, and the sort of person who, if she had 4 people coming to dinner who drank 4 different scotches, she'd just go get 4 different scotches. That's how even though she worked full time, she was a teacher. And
yeah. And what did your father do?
My father was in the wholesale food business.
Oh, okay. So there's
it all back
some
home.
of the relation for it.
Yeah.
And great, you're saying they would cook at home.
Not my father, but my mother
way.
was an extraordinary cook. Yeah.
Well, and so was your trajectory at that point, just I'm going to become a chef or something like that?
When I went to CIA, I thought I was going to become a chef or maybe a food stylist or something like that. But when I graduated and I taught cooking and then went in the restaurant business, I realized I didn't want to do that anymore.
How come?
It's horrible.
Is it just the business side of it?
No. It's very, very repetitive. So, and I wanted something more interesting.
Really not enough creativity.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. So then you did that. And then I also heard that I think it was around 32. So it wasn't really that early. But so you were in school and trying the restaurant business for a long time before you got into events? Yeah.
I graduated CIA in 75. And then I was working for a gentleman who's now my ex-husband, and he had a bunch of restaurants that we were opening, and I ran the restaurants, and then I ran parties in the restaurants, and then people started asking me if I could do events outside. So kind of evolved.
But was it just for the catering side at first that they were asking you?
No, because I was running the parties, and we had one of the restaurants was named Luchow's, and it was the largest German restaurant in the world, and we had about 8 banquet rooms in those times, and I was, Mm-hmm.
So when you decided to strike out on your own, I mean, was that a really frightening kind of a thing, or for you?
Terrifying. Starting at your own.
Because I pictured you as more like just jump off that cliff.
No. It was terrifying. But I mean, it was less terrifying because I was married. My parents were alive. I definitely felt I had some support system, but and nor did I have any idea how insanely difficult it would be.
Well, also back then, I mean, look, I view you as you're absolutely one of the pioneers for sure. So, right, but it's not like there was a business at that time, right?
No, so I mean, we invented it. We didn't. We did. We said most of us, even though it's become so trite now, either planned some huge event or planned your wedding, and you were like, Jesus, someone should do this for people. This is really horrible. It's so it kind of evolved. We morphed it together. Yeah.
But what was it? So I'm always curious about that moment of making that transition, because I'm also thinking it was even harder for women in business back then at the same time. So you're going up against a lot of.
Well, I had graduated as a chef and I worked in kitchens. So that was the female aspect of it. It was a piece of cake because all those guys were such pigs that this was nothing.
Yeah. Sylvia. When I interviewed Sylvia Weinstock a while ago, she told some story. I don't know if you're aware of it, where she was in France. So it was a bunch of French chefs and they looked really down on her, gave her a very hard time. And, she baked and they tasted it. They finally saw what was really going on and they just started applauding her. She had to get over that hump too. It was a really big deal.
No, I mean, they just all wanted to sleep with me in those days. So that was a little different.
God, you had to deal. So you had your own Me Too thing going on.
Yeah.
They're all pigs.
Well, they were then.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Well, so for you to start it, I mean, how did you go about doing it? Given that, I mean, even today, it's hard as hell to start a company, in the event business, but you didn't even know there was no template.
I think that's the idea. I think I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. If I knew then what I know now, I never would have had the nerve to start it.
You really think so? You wouldn't have done it?
No question. But, I had gone to performing arts high school. I was an actress and then I'd studied acting for a long time and then I studied food and I was like, I'm dramatic and I know food. I can throw a great party. Yeah. What could be so difficult?
So, and the acting part of it, that you didn't think of doing that seriously?
I did. I worked for a while. I worked with the Living Theater when I was 16.
Oh, you did? Yeah. I know about the Living Theater.
Yeah, they wanted me to go to Europe with them. My parents were absolutely adamant, wouldn't let me go, which I thought was outrageous at the time. But Julian Beck personally asked me. We used to do a lot of street theater. I remember it was 1969, 1970. We were all nuts.
Yeah. Well, so, and isn't there a relation between,
theater and
acting and what you're doing now?
If you question 3/4 of people in our business in any way, shape, or form all came out of theater, either art direction, like David Beam, someone like that, or stage management, or all of us are theater people who it's the closest thing.
Well, it's creating theater, but it also seems that it's part, before we get into there, where I definitely want to go, is the personality that it takes, to be an entrepreneur in this business, right? And there has to be a certain amount of charisma, you know.
Well, you certainly have to like.
Performing.
You have to like people, or at least put up a good front that you like people, one or the other. Yeah.
Well, and then there's the whole therapy aspect of it too,
that's
right?
Different, yeah.
I was going to say, because I heard you somewhere talking about therapy, and I was going to compete with you and see which one of us has had the most.
Oh, I'm sure I have.
But then there's that whole element too, right? Combining that and dealing with people the way you did. What was it like back in, what was it, 86, something like that?
Yeah,
how did people
86.
view you when this was new and you're coming into it?
Well, they thought either I was a caterer, and I would say, no, I'm not a caterer. They said, well, you're a florist. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a party planner, which really didn't. I mean, I think Harriet Katz was the only one in this market before me. Maybe another woman named Judy Schwartz. She just passed away. Yeah. Maybe four of us. And I was like, I can do this. But I was very adamant about, and I guess a little full of myself, about bringing something new to the table. So anybody who had been around, any of the hotels, any of the restaurants, or the usual suspects in the market, photographers, I wouldn't use, because I wanted to do something very different. I wanted to suggest that there was a whole way to do this slightly differently.
Interesting. So, like what? Can you give me some examples?
Well, I certainly wasn't going to work at the Plaza or the Pierre or the Waldorf. I wanted to do things that were innovative, and not that they were so unusual in the party world, but they were unusual for weddings specifically, like to have a tarot reader, which now, doesn't matter, or your signature cocktail. But weddings used to be extremely formulaic.
Yeah.
There was a certain
so
thing,
much
things were expected.
That's just going out the window now.
Right. Well, even though, but I try to strike a balance between tradition, especially since the world sucks. People are hanging on for dear life with something. Are we
going to go there?
I always go there. So talk to me. We're going to go there.
Yeah.
But I think people, there is a craving for tradition, but it doesn't have to be done in a trite way.
Well, and I'm going to definitely want to talk about today, because buying habits have changed so much, and I'm curious how you deal with that. But going back to the very beginning, do you remember your very first event? Was it a wedding?
My very first, the people who hired me outside of the restaurants, my very first event was a wedding in a loft downtown. I put an ad in New York Magazine, and some very foolish people responded and hired me for, I'm sure it was like $12.
Do you remember what you did for that loft?
Yeah, I remember. Well, again, when you're starting out, you're reading centuries ago Special Event Magazine and all. You're thinking I'll try musicscaping and this and that. I mean, whatever you read about, you're like, let me give it a shot. But so I do remember, and I remember being asked about a receiving line and not having a clue what it was, or making it up. But and I think obviously when you're very inexpensive and the people are very inexperienced, anything you do is good.
You cut your teeth there, right?
Right. Yeah.
Was there a moment where almost like an epiphany that really hit you about finding your own personal style? And your
I don't
way
know if
of
it was a
doing
moment, but it was definitely an evolution when I realized, first of all, I began to really dislike the business because of so much disingenuousness that was involved in it. And I finally said, this is who I am. And these are my talents. These other things are not my talents. And if you want to hire me, it'd be my pleasure to collaborate with you. But I thought, if I can't do the business the way I want to do it, then I'd rather just stop.
And first, how were people doing it at that time before I hear how you did it?
I don't really know. I think I think they were shoppers and brokers. I mean, forget commissions, right? That's not even relevant in this conversation. But I'm saying they walk in, we'll take you to 3 restaurants. We'll look at
very much in the box. We're talking very, like you said, formulaic.
Yeah, because that was how, it was like travel agents in those times, right? I think everything was, here's the prescribed way to do it. Mm-hmm. And you were really a broker.
Yeah. So what did you, I mean, you must have had a lot of different vision back at that time for what you were going to do. Are there some examples of what you did that were really different right at the time?
I think, my own wedding, which was, Peter, my ex-husband and I are still very close friends. We always joke about it. It was a great wedding. The marriage sucked, but it was a great wedding. But, we had stations in 1986. That's ridiculous. Nobody had food stations. And I had all my friends from CIA cooking and very interactive and things like that. Food and beverage, that was the other thing. Other than, again, Harriet, who I think had a deep respect for food. Mm-hmm. The common wisdom in that time was that food doesn't matter. It's a wedding.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it was horrible. And I was in shock. I was like, what do you mean that you're spending a fortune on, and you're going to serve dog food? Like, that's not acceptable.
That's crazy. So, and when you started doing stations, did it at the time, was it also a way of presenting it, or was it just simply the simple concept of having stations versus a sit down?
It was the possibility to have a variety of great food without having to choose, chicken or beef or something like that. So we had,
I see.
Yeah.
God, and what other elements back at that time was new that you were looking at doing?
God, so long ago. I think, serving decent wines and good champagnes, which was unheard of, or 3 or 4 or 5 white wines at the bar, even if they were inexpensive.
So basic to me right now. It's hard to even imagine.
Well, you used to come up with a signature cocktail. People thought you were a genius.
Yeah.
Now it's all de rigueur, but it wasn't then. Or different china, or all sorts of things. Yeah.
So you were having these epiphanies, revelations about how you're going to do it differently, and food stations, like you said, wine, different drinks. What else?
I think entertainment, that there wasn't just one band on stage all night, or that the band, or that someone was interested. Again, all these things sound so simplistic now, but they weren't. That nobody was talking about what the band is wearing.
Oh, they would just show up. I'm going to guess that like cummerbunds and bow ties, the ruffle shirts.
Or what the photographer was wearing, or photojournalistic photography was not even.
Oh, just portraits, right? Period. Yeah. That was it.
I mean, Dennis Reggie, I think, was the first one to do that. When, Dennis Reggie, who did all the Kennedys, was the first one to come up with, you could do weddings in a more natural way when you're shooting.
Yeah. And you had an eye for that, to be able to appreciate that.
Well, I felt everything was so canned and so stiff, and not just the photography, but the entire experience, that there was, as young people started, because then it became that it wasn't just the parents paying for the wedding. Mm-hmm. A lot of my clients have much more money than their parents ever would have. So once they started paying for it, they were interested in being able to have the kind of party that they would throw.
It sounds like that's the kind of client you were attracting too.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was not. I think I suffered in those days a little bit from the same disease, although not as fatal as our president has, which is, I think I felt that shooting from the hip was more worthwhile, or made it more genuine. Yeah. So that, which is bullshit, as we know.
Yeah. Okay, we can go in a tangent here.
But I'm just saying,
raring to go, but I'll hold back.
So I think I felt like, I was very off the cuff. I didn't have, when I first met some of my colleagues / competitors who had gone to Wharton and had a business plan right. and long-term goals and short-term goals for the business, I was like, oh my God, we're a different species. Yeah. That's not how I came out, which is not to say they were absolutely right, but I just wasn't, I didn't start reading business books until maybe 10 years ago,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, and isn't that one of the biggest struggles? Because, you're an artist, we're artists, is balancing the art with the business. Like, how do you integrate it? For some people it's easy, but it's been very hard for me.
I know it. Well, clearly it's very hard for all of us. That's why so many of us go under. I think a lot of my financial decisions are emotional decisions. I mean, we're sitting in an office that is probably too expensive. If someone were to look at my books, they go, that's ridiculous. But I was living in the West Village for many, many years. I wanted to maintain a foothold here, and I wanted to be in a certain block, and I wanted to be in a certain building. So I'm like, well, the hell with it. That is not, if I were running General Motors or something, I would have been deposed,
No, so get the place. And by the way, so people know, you're on beautiful part of Fifth Avenue in New York City. Yes,
because it makes me happy when I have to come into work in the morning, and not, we'll see how long I can last, but I'm just saying, but that's not necessarily, I wouldn't advise someone going into business to be dealing that way.
But on the other hand, look how long you are lasting, and at the top of your game. I mean, it's been a long time. So have you feel like you've changed the way you do things with a business perspective? How has it changed?
I think I'm less willing to, and just to elucidate, I think because a lot of my male colleagues who I've become very close with, and I say male colleagues because for the most part, this kind of business energy, for the most part, comes from men.
You still feel so? I mean, like
Well,
in terms of
the people I talk to, and I have, Lynn Easton, who's a very close friend,
Yeah.
Brian Raffinelli, Colin, all of them are like, stop putting your own money in, don't put your own money in, rather than, the old days, the client didn't want to pay for a dance floor, and I thought the dance floor was so integral to the design.
So you would, no
yeah,
kidding.
it's just stupid, right? So
Wow.
I don't do that anymore if I can help it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. So what else have you done from a business perspective now? I mean, you're thinking more of the numbers ahead of time before you invest in a new idea or something.
I don't want to spend a lot of time doing something that is not going to be
profitable, right? So you're looking more
with rare
profit
exception.
margin.
I mean, obviously, Lady Gaga calls me, I'll talk about it. But otherwise, it's not. So I keep telling the planets, as I call them, this business is no fun in the long term if you can't make any money. It's just not fun.
Yeah, I think people right now, it's just the whole market feels so saturated.
It's ridiculous.
And people think, especially planners, these young planners think it's so glamorous.
It's so glamorous,
and they're going to come in and yeah.
I spoke at something for Preston last week. And
the Protégé program?
Yeah. And someone asked me, one of the planets, lovely. They were a lovely, very, very dedicated, insightful group. They said, why do you think there's so many? I said, because people like myself made it look really good.
Seriously.
We weren't showing you, all the sweat and blood. And now I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of sweat and blood. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you recommend to someone coming in, the way they look at it? Or what should they consider? I think it's
ridiculous to not. I don't think, a lot of people know nothing. I'm shocked. A lot of really expert people know nothing. And then there are total geniuses. David Stark, Preston. There's a ton of people who know a lot of things. So I don't mean to sound that way, but I don't think it ever occurs to people that they should figure out what Beurre Blanc is or what's the different kinds of lighting or what. They just think go get a client and seduce them.
I can't even count. On the music side of my business, there are still so many planners. Like there's a timeline. It's just a template. Wait a minute. Who is your client? What is the vision? What is the dream? Right. How are you not customizing? I used to talk about that years ago, right? The idea that it has to be customized per. And that, by the way, business. This is a much greater discussion, of course, but you cannot really grow a business unless you have some templates. You can't invent the thing every time, but without the customization, you can't sustain a business anyway, because that's all we're selling. Everything else is tech, and nonsense and chips and augmented reality. The only thing that really matters is the hands-on touch. That's it. That's all we have to sell, which is all about the emotion, right? Exactly. Yeah. And creating an experience. And I know that wasn't that also something that you helped bring or brought to the table back then, is the experiential approach? That's what you're all about, right? That's what I'm all about. Obviously, it'd be nice if I were the only one, but I'm certainly not. But I was not a protege, but I was a admirer of Joe Baum, who nobody even knows who that is anymore, who basically invented, restaurants as we know it, from the original Four Seasons to the Forum of the 12 Caesars to La Fonda del Sol, where they were theme restaurants, and Charlie O's, which Peter and I owned for a long time. The fact is that you weren't, it's so trite, but it's, sell the sizzle, not the steak. That's selling 101, and that's what people want. And as the world gets more and more depressing, as people are more and more freaked out by the news, they want it even more so. Well, let's go there. Not in terms of political side of it. No, but I would love to do this. It's so scary out there. Like even right now, there was something on the news. Constantly possible recession and lowering the rate again and trying to figure out, the constant fear that to me is what's really belying all of this, for the past 2.5 years, is the fear and how, what do we do in the event business? I'm an extremely anxious person. I'm, classic Jewish neurotic to the hilt. And I think like anything else, it's at a certain point, even if you have fear of flying, you're on a plane and it's turbulence, at a certain point, you just go, screw it. Like if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down, because you cannot physically or intellectually or emotionally sustain that kind of fear 24/7. So at a certain point, it's really what I try to do. I'm like,
I'm in it. There's nothing I can do about it. What am I going to do? Go get a job as a ballerina?
Yeah, right.
So yeah,
Right.
I can only control my costs and do good work and do the best you can.
And just keep your. Do you pay attention to the news very much on a daily basis?
I do, because I'm so politically upset.
Yeah.
So I try not to, but I also, there's a large part of me that feels it's our responsibility to pay attention to what's going on, and that part of what the other side is banking on is wearing us down.
Well,
so
and it is, we're becoming numb
No
and just
question.
used to it. It blows me away. Nothing is a surprise now.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's like, oh, there he
But
goes
he said
again.
it himself. He said, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. And then
Right.
he's absolutely correct, unfortunately.
Yeah. But how is that relating to events? I mean, it seems to me that what's the best thing that we can do for people is provide this experience where they can kind of disappear in this for a moment, for 4 hours.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But I have found, which is a very positive thing, that people are, for the most part, less interested, not all my clients, but less interested in their own experience and more in what they're going to bring to their friends and family. So people, because wealthy people do not only have wealthy friends and family, so they're like, how cool is this that I can deliver this fabulous destination, or I can, these people would never see anything like this, or they'd never get to have a day like this if we weren't gifting them with this. And isn't that wonderful? And I think people get a kick out of that, and that's driving a lot of it. It's like, I love taking friends of mine who couldn't afford it to a really fabulous restaurant.
Yeah.
And I'm not a rich person, but it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Taste this, taste that. Have you ever had a wine like this? So if you multiply that by hundreds of people at a wedding, it's a great joy. That kind of generosity, both emotional and financial, it brings a lot of joy to people.
I never thought about it that way, that clients are also thinking in that way. Not that they're self-centered or anything like that, but that's interesting to me. Yeah, for especially for the destination weddings you're talking about in particular.
And so when people ask me about a band, for example, my first thing is, well, let's look at your guest list. Who's your guest list? Who's coming?
Yeah.
Because it's not enough for the two of you to be dancing. That doesn't count. Or when a bride says to me, I don't eat grapes. I said, well, who cares what you eat? You're going to have plenty to eat. But does that mean, are you allergic to them, or you just don't like them? Because
that's like when someone
who's
says,
on the guest list.
Yeah, and when someone says, there's a certain kind of music I can't stand. Yeah, but wait a minute, it's going to jam-pack the dance floor.
Exactly.
If you are an event planner, venue, caterer, photographer, or any other industry professional, you really should be aware of and using the Party Slate marketing platform. And I want to say, I only work with sponsors whose product or service I'm either fully aware of or even use myself. So you can create a free profile that can act as a photo-rich portfolio, or Party Slate has additional membership options available. And if you're planning or involved with an event, from weddings to fundraisers to baby showers and really everything in between, you should use Party Slate to get inspired. Save your favorite ideas and contact top professionals to help create your dream event. New photos from real events are uploaded to Party Slate daily, and their editorial team publishes articles that highlight the latest trends and planning tips. It is a really great site. You've got to visit partyslate.com to get started. And again, that's partyslate.com. Okay, so in terms of entertainment, look, I'm one of the first to say every crowd is different because, right? It's like a chemical equation.
No question.
And yet, what information about your guests, though, can actually help you? Because it's still, the demographic is generally really widely varied at almost every wedding.
Well, but some weddings tilt more towards
or more the age of the bride and groom, for example.
The age and the age of the guest list. But also, let's face it, a very deeply New York crowd is never going to go for a band that's a little kitschy, or that's, a show like Party on the Moon, which is a great band, I think, for a certain crowd.
You want to have some edge.
Yeah. A New York band is going to, New Yorkers, like really tried and true New Yorkers, are not going to go with Party on the Moon. It's too whimsical. It's too, too much sampling. There's too much, they want a real, an edgy.
Geez, I've got one to suggest to you offline here.
Great.
Not one of my own. I mean, my own can do it too,
Yeah.
but there's one in particular right here in New York. But anyway, So let's talk about entertainment. What is your philosophy about entertainment for a wedding? We'll stick with weddings. How do you approach it beyond what you just said?
Well, I think that has to have a beginning, middle, and an end. So if you're spending a couple $100,000 on a wedding and your fallback position is let's have 3 pieces from the band do jazz for cocktails, that's a big mistake.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be like everybody else.
Money. Exactly. And it's also, you might as well not have anything.
Yeah.
That's a very good place where you could have, I don't know, bluegrass or Django Reinhardt or like something different.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with the ceremony. I love vocals during the ceremony.
Oh, me too. I don't understand. Like in my own thing, I've suggested that to people so many times. The few times people go for it, I mean, it just supports the feeling for the couple, and people are crying
because
and yet
people
they don't.
Are so afraid of it. Has to be very, very secure people who really have the courage of their convictions. People are really afraid of being seen as cheesy.
Mm. And they assume that having a singer,
exactly, or it looks so over the top, or it looks. I mean, we did a fabulous choir for Donnie Deutsch's daughter, and Donnie's an old client of mine and a friend, and Donnie was like, and not a dry eye in the house. It was just. He was like, that was the best decision. I was like, so glad you thought of that, as we always do. But it's because it's so powerful. You really have to have the guts to go with it.
I did a real simple thing one time. It was for a wedding. I found out that the bride loved 1,000 Years. It's a beautiful song. Mm-hmm. And I thought, at first I was thinking.
I love that song.
Yeah, it is.
Well, and I'm very easy.
Yeah, all right. Well, me too. I mean, I know we both love music, but I had just a keyboardist with a soprano sax. You know what I'm talking about, right? That soprano, beautiful, sweet sound. And I had them first play during what we call the prelude, right before the bride went down the aisle. Then and the singer was really good looking, so I had her dressed down, and I had her like just kind of off in the corner. Yeah, let's let the attention be on the bride.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but when she started singing 1,000 Years as the bride walked down the aisle, I was moved.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, there were times, at this wedding that we're talking about, I was the same thing. I was crying. It was really touching and sweet. So, but it has to be genuine, and it has to be evocative of who you are. You can't be, okay.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I think
like a client, what they're like and how you decided.
If you're someone who doesn't like being in the spotlight, or you're a very understated, shy person, you don't want to have a choir or a chorus during your processional because you're scared enough as it is.
Good point, right.
It has to be someone who's going to own the moment in with some flair. Yeah. I think people say to me, "Do we have to have an after party?" I said, "Well, if you usually go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, I wouldn't suggest." But people are like, "Well, I keep reading all these things that say I have to have an after party." I said, "Well, that's ridiculous." So it should be. And it's harder and harder because people, either they're not forthcoming or they're not sure of what their favorite things are. But that's how you have to do it. Yeah.
I read or heard somewhere you said an event should keep unfolding and constantly surprising you.
Right.
Can you say more about that?
I think, and I said it at one of the Engage conferences, which was, I said, if a party is beautiful, if it's extraordinarily visually compelling, and you walk in and you see that, but that's all, nothing else happens. There's no surprises. There's no sense of fun or things unexpected occurrences. I said, it's kind of like taking Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt home and having them just lie there.
Oh, hold on. I need a minute to recover from that one.
and that's really what I think, because that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
But then if someone, if you're a vegetarian and someone puts the vegetarian plate right in front of you without you having to hail down a waiter, or before someone thought enough to mark that on a waiter's sheet, or I understand you're allergic to red wine, so that's why you don't have a red wine glass, or what is really most magical about events, but it's a big pain in the neck, is place cards as opposed to just seating at tables. I mean, guests really appreciate.
They appreciate the place cards
when if it's not thrown in a hat, and just set out. But if it's, George Soros is one of his geniuses. His talent is he will sit with a 1,500 person guest list and go through every single table. And inevitably people leave one of his parties and say, I can't believe I had the most fascinating conversations all night.
That's a whole nother thing, isn't it? And why not do it even for a wedding? Well, I suppose at a high level, this is probably typical who you're putting together to have an experience, right?
Of course. That's why people come to me and say, we don't want a regular wedding. I don't want to sit at a table for 2 hours. I don't want to, I can't stand it. Because no one is really spending some time thinking how it's going to go.
Wow, that's a really good point.
So when it unfolds in that way and you're sitting next to someone, I mean, our most favorite way to schedule a wedding is to have cocktails and then dinner and maybe an hour and a half dinner without dancing. Background music and then get up and dance.
So
and
they can really get into it.
I think it's the most civil, and I think people get to talk, people get to drink and eat good food, and then they can really party. And if people want to leave, then it's okay.
Geez, right now I'm thinking of that movie, My Dinner with Andre. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
I saw that like 6 times. I see it like every 8 years, as I change.
See it again,
me too. And in different, ways.
Yeah.
But what are some other ways that you have parties unfold? Do you have any examples that really stick in your mind that were particularly fun for you and surprises?
Well, I think the same way you want a wedding to unfold, you want a wedding weekend to unfold. So I like to, for the rehearsal dinner or the night before the rehearsal, I like to come up with a theme. Either, the simplest theme is a white party. We did a truffle fest at a wedding. At a wedding on the Amalfi Coast because it was just a truffle season. We said let's have it. So then we hired someone to costume them to be the Monsieur Truff. So things like that, because if guests they don't want to get dressed up and sit at a table with the same people 3 nights in a row and do the same thing. You really want. We did a movie night as the last day, after brunch for the guests who were still staying.
What was the movie?
We just Wedding Crashers.
See, there you go. Yeah. That's great.
But we, things like that. We just brought out pizza and popcorn and let everyone sit on bean bags. Yeah. So you really want to look at the whole weekend, and almost all the weddings we do now are even if they're not destinations, they're pretty much 3-day events.
Geez, what else can I? So are some of them even more than 3 days? I imagine
sure.
so.
Well, if you're taking people, we did a wedding in Istanbul last summer where we had trips to the souks, and then we had trips to the hammam, and we organized lunches and concierge services and 5 days of events, really, with the wedding in the center. Yeah. Wow.
I'm wondering, what about corporate and fundraising galas? Are you doing is most of what you do now weddings?
No, most of what I do is social, but not necessarily weddings. So we do bar and bat mitzvahs. We do a lot of birthday, really. Like 50th, 60th, 70th, that kind. Can you give me some story about that? We did a wonderful 40th birthday at the Boom Boom Room this year. For most of them are much smaller. We're like 60 people, and it was fabulous. And we had rooms for all the guests for the whole weekend. We had dinner the night before, and then the Boom Boom Room, and then a brunch. We did a whose birthday party? Well, for Mr. Soros, we did 8 85th birthday parties around the world. So that was
can you tell me more about that? What do you mean?
No. I shouldn't have even said that.
NDA?
Yeah.
I don't know what an NDA is. You can tell me. Mm-hmm. Also, I know that light design is really important to you. I think somewhere you said that you would love to take a light design course somewhere.
Yeah, I would love to. And I would absolutely love to. I'd go hang out with Ray.
Well, that's why I sent you Ray Thompson's interview.
Oh, that's great.
It was everyone should listen to that.
Okay,
oh my God. Listen, to me, lighting, I'm assuming to you too, the visual nature of it, the emotional component of it, and how it could just glue everything together, take it to another level, is stunning. I mean, Ray to me was the classic example of it. No,
he understands, right. Him, Bentley, people who have been doing this for a while, it's not just pin spot, 16 pin spots and an upwash. No.
Well, what about, all right, so how do you approach light design? How involved are you with the lighting designer?
I'm very involved in the sense of the mechanics of what it looks like on the floor, which is not to say what the light looks like. It's what the cans look like.
You mean make sure you don't see them, like Ray talks about that. Work them into the decor.
Right. What the wires look like, things like that drive me crazy. Or the LED lights that you look into, the zillion
which are not
colors
very warm, by the way.
And that people kick down the aisle, things like that.
Yeah.
I am less involved in the lighting design because most of the time we collaborate with a designer, and we'll do it together, but generally the designers know more than I do. I mean, not the lighting designers alone, the floral and event designers who we collaborate with have a better take on it.
Well, so let's go there too. In terms of your approach to creating a team, I'm assuming that with you in particular, when people hire you, they're really listening to you. You're the one that's saying, okay, for this kind of client, real well. I mean, this photographer, this floral designer, this cake.
We try to do it that. I mean, for the smaller jobs, we do design in-house and hire freelancers. For my really super duper high end jobs, they usually want a name.
Yeah.
Or I will introduce them to someone that I think is well suited for them. I don't like to be the shopping service. I will if I have to. If they don't like the first people I introduce them to, I'm going to have to take them to others. Mm-hmm. But I try to channel the client and get as close as possible to what they have in mind.
Well, and it's a big part, isn't it? It's like cooking. It's like like we were talking about, the crowds are different from party to party, right? It's like this chemistry equation of who you're putting together and how they work together in the collaboration.
I mean, Gabby, who basically, is my head producer and runs the company with me, will sit, we always laugh about it because we'll be on a plane and say, we'll go, who would be great for so-and-so? I didn't think of that because we're running through a roster in our head. So sometimes, we just worked with Liz Banfield and Todd, who's been a friend of mine for a million years, Todd Fiskus, who we never really worked with before, but I knew he was so perfect, this client, and they both hit it out of the park. It was extraordinary. But even though I hadn't worked with Liz before, I had seen her work, and she was Southern, and this was down South. I was like, this is going to be perfect.
I'm imagining, Marcy, that with the kind of budgets that you get, and I understand not every single party is like this.
For sure.
Yeah, but is there like a dream situation for you that you haven't done yet that you would love to do in terms of how you design a party and what you do?
Well, I almost got to do it this year, and it's not a very big event. I mean, it really wouldn't work for more than 60 people, but I've been pitching it for years, and I did a little bit of I still didn't get what I wanted. I want to do a movable feast in the sense like a 60-person gig where you have cocktails and hors d'oeuvres at one space, and you get on a very, very chic party bus where you have great champagne and wine, and you go and you have of course, and you have the appetizer at another place, and then you go somewhere else for the main course, and then dessert and dancing. And I thought that would be so much fun.
Have you done that yet?
I have not. I've done little smidges of it, but no one's ever let me do the whole thing.
So that is I think that would be such a great idea.
And I think people would just be blown away.
Oh my God. No, that's a really, so many things you could do with that. I'm also curious with also LGBTQ plus. What do you, yes.
What do I think?
What are the differences? I mean, look, people are people, but yet it seems how do you approach an LGBTQ? Is there much difference, than not?
No, it's a tricky subject because I feel I may not be the most politically correct person on the planet, to say the least. And I sort of rail against political correctness, but I resent greatly someone criticizing me on my lack of, let's say, inclusion or whatever, because I've been friends with gay people before most of the people who are talking were ever born. I've been like I know it sounds like an old cliche, but my best friends really are gay people, and they always have been, from theater to cooking. So I did gay weddings way before they were legal, when they were just commitment ceremonies.
Fantastic,
and so the idea of putting something on my website that says we do gay weddings is to
I don't know
me
about
like,
that.
well, no, several people advise that. It would be like we do Jewish weddings, or we do. I was like, it should go without saying.
No, it's just whatever.
Exactly. So I think, that I understand I understand grooms and grooms, brides and brides. I mean, the terminology like that, rather than always saying brides and grooms.
Yeah.
But I'm a little resentful of the implication that, some people are like the first gay person who ever appeared, and they're going to teach us. That's bullshit.
Well, on another front, can I ask about pricing? Policy, because it's
much as we can get. Yeah.
Well, I know it's such a sensitive issue in this industry, and I certainly don't believe that there should be one way of doing it. Of course not. But what is your pricing philosophy?
Well, we changed a couple of years ago to percentage, which is not to say that on every single job we get a percentage, but we usually are between 15 and 18% of the total budget. And if a client does not is very nervous about that, or is that makes them really uncomfortable, then we'll say, I'll come up, we will do a flat fee, but it's based on the budget you're telling us. And if the budget goes up substantially,
I was going to say, yeah.
Because for years and years and years, I charged a flat fee and I watched these budgets through no fault of our own, but through the client's choices, spiral out of control. And we're still stuck at that, 50 or 75 grand. It was really terrible.
They wouldn't understand that you would say, look, you got to.
But they're also sharks, I mean, most of our clients are business people. They're like, well, you signed a contract.
Yeah.
We do understand and we feel for you. Maybe you shouldn't do that.
So if you're doing a percentage, they're getting like a line item list of everything, basically?
No, we're just saying it's. I mean, we do shopping. We do all sorts of things that are not included in the percentage.
Yeah.
But it's their budget. They decide what they want to spend. And then it's entirely up to them, but we're getting a percentage of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something, it scares a lot of people.
Certainly. But at a certain level, I mean, it's the way all of us at a certain level are attempting to do our businesses because it's really not sustainable otherwise.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, I also want to ask you about this epic that you and Sarah Haywood put together, the Event Planners International Collaborative. Sounds really interesting. Can you tell me? And you and Sarah, I mean, talk about a duo.
When we don't kill each other, when we don't come out bloodied. I'm very, very fond of Sarah. She's fabulous and very smart. Yeah, we decided a couple of years ago that it was there was a need for a really hands-on, very, very, very boutique group so we only take about 15 students, and we haven't done it this year because we both got too busy, but we did it 3 years in a row, and we charge a lot, but we basically give them the keys to our brain. They look at all our contracts. They look at our sale. We do pitching. We do role playing.
Wow.
We do really, there's virtually nothing is off the table. So it's we take them into the kitchen at the hotel and show them what they should know and talk to the chef and do tasting dinners and everything. It's really, really, really very, very down and dirty.
Yeah. It sounds really intensive. How long is it?
It's usually 3 or 4 days. And it's very intense, and we have 3 meals a day with them. So at the end of the days, we're like, oh my God, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
But and a lot of those people go on and go to Engage or have been to Engage before, but we get the most wonderful emails and letters. It really, Sarah doesn't have children, neither do I. And it's this is our legacy project.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Makes us feel good.
Is there one on the books?
No, what we're talking about. She's got to get, she's producing Engage.
Right. I forgot in October.
So she really can't do much of anything else.
So
she's
for
like,
2000, So for 2020, you're going to look into something.
We're going to do it again.
And people just go to your website to find it?
Yeah.
Or is there a website for it?
But there is an Epic website, but needs to be updated.
Yeah.
As most people in this business, we're always running as fast as we can to stay in one place.
And just a couple more questions. So when you think, how far ahead do you think? Like 5 years from now, do you think about what you want to be doing 5 years from now? What's next for you?
I think about it all the time, but that doesn't make me do anything about it. Well, I'm trying to write a book. I'm trying to write a novel, and I've been trying for a long time.
Novel?
But I haven't.
Fiction? Having nothing to do with the event business?
Well, it does. It's the old joke when they asked Flaubert, who was Madame Bovary, who's the character, he said, c'est moi, because meaning, any book you write is going to certainly have to do with the event business because I have to do with the event business. So, but yes, it has.
This sounds interesting.
Should be interesting if I ever get anything down.
Oh, you gotta wake up first thing you do, give it an hour
That's what they
or
say.
something like that.
My brother is a best-selling author, and he locks himself in the room for a year.
Does he?
Just finished his 14th book. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What's your brother's name?
Howard Blum. He writes nonfiction. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. What about, do you have a morning routine?
Well, I don't move without coffee. So that's my morning routine. I really, and everyone knows not to speak to me without coffee.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I absolutely don't move. And then usually I take the dogs out if I'm up first. But it's coffee.
What is your work schedule like?
Ridiculous.
Is it just whatever, or is it all the time kind of a thing?
I'm very addicted to bar classes the last couple of years. So no matter what,
my girlfriend's taking bar. Really? She's about to have her 1,000th one.
Wow.
They give you a balloon or something, right? She's about to.
So I will stop in the middle of the afternoon and go take a class.
That's
but other
fantastic.
than that, we work late.
Yeah, and do you have an end of day routine?
Usually massive quantities of wine.
You sound like Sylvia with the vodka. So with you, it's the wine.
Yeah, but and usually good restaurants and friends, and I am able to when I leave, I will look at it on the subway, etc. But usually I just put my phone away during dinner.
So my last question, I mean, and it sounds very cliche, but I would love to know for you, how do you define success now in your life at this point?
Well, you've been talking to my therapist. I think happiness. I think, which I'm not sure I'm the sort of person who's ever going to get, or self-esteem is such a funny expression, but really on days that I like myself more, I consider that successful. Like, fine, look at that. You don't hate yourself as much this year. Or even if you screw something else, you're like, okay, I screwed something, but you don't want to, like, you don't go on and on and on to yourself.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because it really is.
Because anything else is the root to there. I could say money, I could say this, but the final.
Just have a good day, right?
Exactly. Just have a good day. Wake up, not do anything heinous to anyone, and hopefully have nothing heinous done to you, and sustain your friendships and your client interaction. And, and it doesn't happen every time. And anyone who says it happens every time is lying. But when you get those calls or those letters from people, and that they're not writing 1,000 of them, these are, hard to please customers. Yeah. And they're like, wow, you really created something that I will remember the rest of my life. That is extremely, as I said, especially if you don't have kids and you don't have, I live with someone for 20 years, but aside from that, you feel like you exist, or that at least you've had, some little thumbprint on this planet.
Yeah. Well, gosh, Marcy, thank you. Thank you very much. And you're so open and direct. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my interview of Marcy Blum. Be sure to check out her website at marcybloom.com, and also her social media channels for Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest is at Marcy Blum. And for Facebook, it's Marcy Blum Associates. All of this will be in the show notes as usual at the website of theweddingbiz.com. If you enjoyed this, how could you not? Please share this with your friends and colleagues. Tell everybody about it, not only so they can learn all about Marcy, but also to help the show, for us to help build more of a community to support. And also, if you could give The Wedding Biz just great reviews, assuming you liked it, wherever you get your podcast from, especially iTunes, that would also be very helpful for the show. And don't forget to listen. I got a little announcement here. Don't forget to listen to our follow-on segment with each interview, The Next Level, which comes out Wednesdays, in which I have a guest co-host. Wait till you hear who it is. And together we tease out some of the highlights of the interview of the week. So this will be all about Marcy's interview to help give specific tactics and tips for you to raise your own business to the next level. And I'm so excited to announce the guest co-host is a good friend of Marcy, also a real good friend to the show, Lynn Easton. That is right. We're going to have Lynn Easton as our guest co-host on The Next Level. And then next week, the interview is going to be on Carrie Goldberg, digital travel and weddings editor at Harper's Bazaar. Went to New York City, to the offices there, had a great conversation with Carrie, so much to learn. So be sure to subscribe to The Wedding Biz. And again, want to thank our wonderful sponsor, Party Slate. Be sure to check them out at partyslate.com. I can't recommend them high enough. And we'll see you all next week on The Wedding Biz.